welcome to today's Connect with Southeast Asia online special panel. I'm Jennifer, the managing editor of TechOrange. Today, we're going to use 40 minutes to explore one of the most vibrant and fast-growing markets in Southeast Asia, which is Indonesia. Indonesia, there are 273 million population and with very diverse cultures. So it's one of the most unique markets in the world right now. And therefore, we're very lucky to have two of the unicorn companies from Indonesia to have a chat with us and share their ideas. I'm very delighted to introduce two Indonesian unicorn companies, and one is OVO, the other one is Bukalapak. So the first one, I'm going to introduce Wen-Yo Tan from OVO. Hello.
Hi.
The second one, I'm going to introduce Andrew Xu from Bukalapak. Hello, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Good morning.
So today I want you to share some of the Indonesian markets insight with us, and can you please introduce the OVO company to our audience first, Wen-Yo?
Hi, thank you, Jennifer, for inviting us to this show. So I'm Wen-Yo. I'm running corporate finance in OVO. My background was that I was an entrepreneur. We sold our company to OVO, and now I'm part of OVO, handling M&A. So for OVO, it is one of Indonesia's biggest unicorns in fintech. Our core services is in payments, and it solves a variety of problems, including access, friction, security, and transparency as compared to using cash. We are founded in 2017, and after that, we gradually expanded into the financial services. So currently, on top of having payments, we also have services like lending, insurance, and wealth management that we have to help Indonesians access financial inclusion. So that is OVO.
Okay, because right now I know the fintech penetration in Indonesian market is around 10% to 15%. So can you please tell us what attracts people to your services or products?
So in Indonesia, what you typically realize is that the penetration rates of cash is very high. If you look at cash penetration on its own, it's more than 50% of the market. And the thing is that leaves a very limited room for other modes of payments to thrive. If you look at the credit card penetration rates in Indonesia, it's only around 2% or so. So it is very hard for people to access credit and loans in Indonesia. Just to give you an example, even for myself, when I was trying to apply for a Citibank credit card, I was rejected multiple times despite me having the documents that are required. What OVO serves to do is this. We hope to be able to help the upper middle economy consumers such that they will be able to access all these solutions, these services, and then that gives them sufficient room for them to build up their career and their finances with OVO. So if you look at OVO itself, we have a whole range of solutions. Even as you are starting out your career and you want to make payments easily, you can first use OVO as a payments. Gradually, as you build up your own family, you want to take a loan, OVO will be able to provide you with a loan. And at the same time, as you grow your family bigger, you have more people in your family, you want to buy insurance, and you might even want to grow your wealth as you grow your family. So this is what OVO does for the general Indonesian.
Okay, thank you. And next one, I want to ask Andrew from Bukalapak. Can you please just share your service and your overview with us?
Of course. So Bukalapak is one of the earliest unicorns in Indonesia. It was founded in 2010, and basically it started with the two co-founders, building a website online and then helping people to sell their bicycles online. And then ever since then, Bukalapak basically gradually grew into an all-service marketplace. But what I mean by marketplace is basically, if you want to open a shop as an individual or as a small owner, you can, and then buyers can buy products online from you. Similarly, if you are a big multinational brand or big conglomerate, you can also open in our official store and people will buy products from you. So essentially, it creates a platform for everyone to do commerce with each other. And beyond that, we also have logistics providers as partners who will be able to deliver products from A point to B point, from the seller to the buyer. And then we also work with various payment solution providers to basically allow people to pay even when they don't have a credit card, or like, for instance, by opening cash on delivery, which means that people can buy products and then pay on spot with them in cash. Recently, we've also gone into digital products, which basically is things like phone bills, online services. And then one other big chunk of our business is what we call Mitra Bukalapak, which is basically helping the mom and pop shops 杂货店war rooms in all parts of the country to be able to fill their products through Bukalapak, and people can buy things from these war rooms that are serviced by Bukalapak.
Okay, because right now, like both of the interviewees, they all share their introductions with us, and then right now I'm jumped to the next overview of the Indonesian market. So the first one I want to ask OVO about what's your observation about the markets in Indonesia right now, especially its fintech company, and then it's very challenging in Southeast Asia. So can you please share your ideas and your observation with us?
Yeah, if you look at in Indonesia, I think there are a lot of commentators up that basically say that Indonesia is China probably 20, 30 years ago. I think we can probably attest to that. Currently in Indonesia, what you're looking at is emerging economy. In terms of penetration rates of fintech, it's still frankly quite low. Credit cards also. And on top of that, you're talking about people that are quite a number of the people are still bottom of the pyramid. And probably around, say, 50% of the people in Indonesia have bank accounts. And even the remaining 50% of people who have bank accounts, who doesn't have bank accounts, sorry, let me just repeat what I said. So in terms of banking penetration, 50% of Indonesians don't have a bank account. And on top of that, the other 50% of people who have bank accounts, around 20% of them are significantly underbanked. They use banks as a way for them to get their salaries, but they don't do and employ or deploy any services from a bank. So currently, the situation that we see here is that the penetration rates are very, very low. But what we see really is that, at least in the field of fintech, the government recognizes that there is a strong need to actually help people attain financial independence and to help pull people out of poverty. So what we realize and what we see in the current setting is that even for OVO, in OVO's case, we are working very closely with the government in terms of doing things like working with the government closely in terms of dispersing loans. For example, in COVID-19, there are a lot of Indonesians that are currently out of work. So what we do is in terms of working with the Indonesian government, we work closely in terms of helping them get cash and then dispersing this cash directly to people who are most affected by the pandemic through dispersal directly with their e-wallets. On top of that, we also see that in Indonesia, in the beginning, a lot of MNCs, they are not very keen on working with tech startups. But of late, you have been seeing a lot of startup MNC collaborations. One example I can talk about is that when OVO was first started, I think we were pretty much working very much on building up our ecosystem. Just last year, we announced a partnership with Prudential, which is one of the biggest insurance companies in Indonesia and across the world. And ever since then, we have been dispersing digital insurance. And not to mention, beyond what I mentioned about the government, for a business like us in fintech, we have to work very closely with the government in terms of getting licenses, in terms of lending license, insurance license, or even in wealth management. What I do see is that the government is very, very keen to work with the startups in the fintech space in terms of developing solutions that they think are good, but most importantly, safe for Indonesians to consume. So I think all in all, in terms of the environment here in Indonesia, what the biggest shifts, at least in fintech, it's really the MNC collaborations and also government and private company collaborations that are happening very often right now.
How do you encourage the vast population in Indonesia to get access to your service if there is a very lack of digital infrastructure? Then do you have any ways to tackle with it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Jennifer, if you look at OVO doesn't exist on its own. We work very closely with our ecosystem partners like Grab and Tokopedia, and also offline merchants. One thing that I didn't talk about during my introduction earlier is this. For OVO, we have 6 strong use cases. We are a close partner of Tokopedia. So even when you download Tokopedia, you will be able to pay for Tokopedia purchases using the OVO app. The OVO app will feature prominently on the first page of the app. So Tokopedia is very similar to the Taobao of Indonesia.
Yeah.
The second one would be Grab. Whenever if you want to call for food delivery, or you want to call for a cab, for a taxi, you can use OVO as methods of transaction. So similarly, you'll see the OVO app directly on the Grab app on the first page. Yeah. Currently, we have also around 600,000 offline merchants that transact, that you can pay with. you can pay at using the OVO app. And on top of that, we have also financial services. So if you look at all these use cases together, I think one of the biggest things that we try to do in terms of getting people onboarded is this. We work very closely with our ecosystem partners so that when they download an app from any of our partners, they will automatically be downloading the OVO app. And not to mention, we also try to make the cashing in and cashing out process very similar. Because for example, in Indonesia, one problem and one issue, especially when using e-wallets, is that you need to be able to do top-ups easily. And considering that, like what I mentioned, 50% of Indonesians are unbanked. A lot of them may not have bank accounts to transfer the cash from their bank account directly to the e-wallet. So in Indonesia, for example, we work very closely with Alfamaret and Indomaret, very similar to Quanjia in Taiwan, whereby you can just go to any of the 便利店 and just 充值, and then the cash will just go in. And then after that, you can even cash out from some of these channels. So cash in, cash out is very similar. And then we also create a lot of use cases for them to use their cash. So this is how we improve penetration of OVO and adoption of OVO in Indonesia.
Okay, so based on your explanation, we know that maybe they need to use the app or like work closely with other apps that they use in their lives. So does that mean that your users are mostly like young people, the young generation? And do you have any like observations of their user behaviors? Is there anything interesting that you can share with us?
Yeah. If you talk about us, definitely for sure, we have a wide range of users actually. I mean, we started actually in the malls. So what we target in the beginning would probably be people with credit cards, with bank accounts, and go to the malls very frequently. So we are talking about the upper middle economy, because we are founded by a property developer called Lipo Group, and they have around 300 over malls across 400 over cities in Indonesia. So that is where we got our start. So in terms of the clientele that was using OVO, it's mainly people that are more well-to-do, people who are able to spend time in the shopping malls. But after Grab invested in us, we started to work very closely and embed ourselves closely with people using the Grab app, for example. And if you look at people using the Grab app, most of them are people in the middle economy. And a lot of them are young. A lot of them are young people. Why so? Because Grab itself is an online app embedded that you can download your smartphone. And if you talk about the early adopters in Indonesia, I think naturally across any country, the people that are first to adapt will be the young people, because they will have access to these apps. And then not to mention the fact that for them, they are also very quick, fast learners as compared to people that are generally older and may not have the ability to understand digital trends very well. So one thing that I realized also in Indonesia, it's for example, in terms of, if you talk about shops, I think Andrew can probably elaborate a little bit more. Very fast adopters. One of the very popular trends that I've been seeing, at least, is that a lot of Indonesians themselves, the influencer culture is very strong. So you have a lot of influencers out there. They also started to go Instagram selling items. So I think what we try to do is that we want to be there at the point in time when a transaction happens. It could be an Instagram transaction. It could be an OVO transaction. It could be a transaction in any of the malls. So the key thing for us is that it's always important for us to understand where people want to transact at. And one of the things that we do see is Facebook shops, Instagram transactions, very popular nowadays. And I think we are also developing solutions that can help facilitate payments in all these different platforms. But this is one example of how things are moving in Indonesia.
Okay, thank you, Wenyo. So next, Andrew, I want you to share like your observation about Bukalapak's strategy in Indonesia, because I know like retail and e-commerce is very competing and it's very challenging markets. So do you have any insights for us?
So I think I'll comment on the marketplace side and not on the Mitra Bukalapak, which is the Warung side. In the Warung side, we are currently #1 in Indonesia, but on the marketplace side, I think we're still falling behind our main key competitors. On the marketplace side, the key differentiator for us has always been the demographic of the users. So for instance, we are actually 70% male and 30% female in our user base. So this is significantly different from Shopee and significantly different from Tokopedia. The second thing is in terms of the categories that we do, it's mostly, again, male-related categories. We have a very strong motorbike and bicycle category right now, as well as traditionally our strength is in handphones and electronics and computers. And the third is, I think, also related to broader trends, is we are trying to focus more on tier 2 and tier 3 cities. And here I can give also a brief, a brief summary of what's happening in Indonesia right now. I think there are two major macro trends. One is definitely, as we all know, the Indonesian economy is growing. COVID-19 has put a dent to it, but yes, in general, it is still growing. And that has been feeding most of the growth in the internet companies so far. But one other trend is that for the foreseeable future, Indonesia will probably not be as fast as China during the 10 years that they've developed. Why? Because the infrastructure, including both logistics and digital, are actually much more lagging than China. The ability to pay, access to banks, all these things, as well as the per capita income will still be lower. So what we've seen is people trying to solve these problems because they exist. We see logistics enablers, we see payment providers, and in terms of e-commerce, we see 2 to 3 main developments. One is social commerce. So basically getting people to physically sell you if you're in the countryside. I sell to you, you sell to him, he sells to her. And then this is actually operated by a tech company. The other is bulk buying. So basically getting 10 or so villagers to buy things at one time and allow them to have a much lower price, especially if that price is directly bought from the manufacturer. And the third, as mentioned earlier, is basically social media commerce, or Facebook or WhatsApp or Instagram. These are things that we are still trying to crack, and everyone else is, but I think for the foreseeable future, they will exist because the infrastructure in Indonesia does not allow big platforms like Tokopedia or Shopee or Bukalapak to directly access these markets as fast as we want to.
Okay, so when you try to expand to the tier 3 or tier 2 cities in Indonesia, do you have you ever seen any interesting user behaviors in terms of the way they purchase or the way they deal with this new trends?
I think in general, once people move up the income ladder, they tend to become more and more like our core main users, which are people on the island of Java, which is, again, more than 50% of the country's population. So they become more and more alike. But at the same time, when they're still in the countryside, all the things I mentioned are still there. They still prefer to, by and large, not transact online or with somebody that they don't know. They might not trust internet service providers or internet customer service and would prefer to buy from someone offline. And of course, payment is another issue. So with e-wallets like OVO, it has been a lot better. But by and large, a lot of people still don't have access to internet or credit cards or banks. So therefore, that is.
So how are you gonna resolve the trust issue when it comes to like purchasing or the things you mentioned?
Yeah, for us as a platform, I think we are still mainly targeting the users who have internet and who have, for instance, a laptop or a mobile phone that's in the first place. So for these, basically, it's standard as e-commerce goes. We provide a lot of return and refund services. We provide chat conversations between the seller and buyer. And of course, Bukalapak as a platform will also provide a certain sense of transaction security for them when needed.
Okay, thank you. And Wenyo, so next, I want you to share your ideas about what is the key for OVO to expand. Maybe now is locally, and what about the next stage? Like, what if you want to expand to more diverse markets in Southeast Asia, or even like further to Taiwan or to the whole Asia? What's your plan for that?
Thank you, Jennifer, for that question. So OVO for us, we will always remain as an Indonesian company. And the reason why we will remain as an Indonesian company, it's also because of the amount of opportunities that we have here. If you look at a market like fintech, where you need to work very closely with regulators, sometimes it is not, we cannot be so confident to say that, especially when we go over to a new market like Thailand or Vietnam, that we can work very well with the regulators and therefore we can get the certain licenses. Currently, I think what has worked well for us in Indonesia is that we maintain very close partnerships and connections with the Indonesian government, such that whenever if we need help in terms of getting a license, to get approval on certain processes, our close connections with the government and the type of goodwill that we have generated with the Indonesian people has certainly helped us in that cause. For us, in terms of expanding overseas, if you are thinking of going to all these new markets where you need to rebuild the relationship, then we have to start from zero. And it may not be very time efficient for us to do that. And the thing is that, to be frank, if you look at Southeast Asia, Indonesia is the biggest market. If I made the crown jewel of the Southeast Asian market, the total population size across the Southeast Asia is around 650 million people. Indonesia is around 270 million. So you're talking about slightly around 40% of this market. And if you're able to take this market well, it should be sufficient for you. And what's more to mention is that the market is heavily underpenetrated. Like what you pointed out, digital payments is underpenetrated. So there's a lot more room for us to grow. And the thing is that we haven't even talked about some of the other things that we're doing, like say the lending market. If you're looking at insurance market, it's also underpenetrated. Indonesia, insurance gross written premiums as a percentage of Indonesian GDP, it's 1 to 2%. But if you look at developed markets like US, it's more like 8%. And if you look at the wealth management market, where the mutual funds market, Indonesia's mutual funds market is very small. We are also talking about 1 to 2% penetration rate of the entire Indonesian GDP. So the thing is that with all these opportunities that are still left untapped, our staunch belief is that if we can continue to leverage on what we know best, which is the Indonesian economy, the Indonesian trends, the Indonesian connections, we want to leverage on those distinct advantages that we have. They can help us build up and grow together with Indonesia as penetration rates across these financial services grow, with the country emerging as a major force in the future. Indonesia at this point in time, it's fourth biggest, but I think that in the next 5 years to come, they will take over US as the third biggest country by population. So that represents a huge amount of opportunity for Taiwanese companies alike, or even for OVO.
Okay, thank you, Wenyo. And Andrew, in terms of expanding the ecosystem, what is your strategy, and what is Bukalapak gonna do in the future?
Okay, are we talking about regional expansion, or are we talking about within Indonesia expansion?
Indonesia expansion first,
Okay.
and then
I think
globally.
Indonesia expansion, it's basically increasing the amount of partnerships that we have. For instance, we are also working with social media influencers, with platforms to generate traffic from social media into Bukalapak, because as we discussed, social media is very big in Indonesia, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or using WhatsApp, for instance. The second, of course, is always, and this will sound cliche, but always expanding our offering based on the market needs. So for instance, in April and May, we did notice a severe drop in the non-essential items due to COVID-19. And so therefore we had to boost our non-traditional offering, which is things in FMCG and food and health items, which were not really on our platform then. So those are things that I think very basic things that we try to do to get it right. Is there a separate question about regional or not really?
But I want to keep following up, because you say you need to like put money or investments into boost to encourage the users. But is it gonna be a never-ending like battle, because the similar situation also happened in China, and they're always like a cash war, at least in the Chinese market.
Bukalapak's main financial strategy was not really to raise as much money as possible and then spend it to acquire. And as you see from the news, basically we are probably the least funded out of the e-commerce platforms in Indonesia by a very large extent. So profitability has always been one of our key metrics, not really burning money and getting acquiring users. So that would eventually lead us to try to solidify certain things, like for instance, our room business, Mitra Bukalapak, our lead in certain categories, and then our grasp in certain demographics in Indonesia. So basically specializing and then making them loyal to us is the strategy going forward, rather than having an all-purpose marketplace that would strive to be number one or number two. So that's the basic logic behind what we're trying to do.
Okay, so when you're going to march into the new markets, what's your strategy for it?
Okay. Do you mean new markets as in
new
regional?
Markets, like regionally, maybe like other markets in Southeast Asia?
Okay, so I think similar with OVO, Bukalapak is a company that will probably only focus on Indonesia, but with a few exceptions. So one, we do cross-border business. For instance, import from China, that's still one of our items. The second is in export. So export, what we are trying to do is actually we're helping the Indonesian government to try to export Indonesian products to other marketplaces, other markets. And the way we do that is basically we're trying to form partnerships with other marketplaces in other countries. So Bukalapak might sell to that marketplace, and that country's buyers might buy from that marketplace Bukalapak items. So therefore, we facilitate the flow of commerce across the borders from Indonesia to overseas. Currently, we do not have plans to set up an office in any other country except for Indonesia.
Okay, so because our audience are mainly Taiwanese, so if they're trying to do business in Indonesia, especially right now with the development of digital economy, what is your recommendation or what is your suggestions for them when they come to Indonesian markets, or how can they like strengthen the bond? So this question I'll ask Wenyo to answer first.
So let me just summarize. Your question is basically advice for Taiwanese companies wanting to come to Indonesia, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think as it pertains to, it might sound cliche, as it pertains to coming to Indonesia, it's always as it pertains to founding a company or to expand here to Indonesia, setting up the local team is extremely important, and getting the right connections in place is very important.
You mean hiring the local people?
Hiring the local people, getting our team, getting somebody from Taiwan to move over, it's important. And the one thing that I can say that is similar between Taiwan and also Indonesia is that if you look at Indonesia is largely a Muslim country with different races. There is the Javanese, Sundanese, but there's also a thriving Chinese community that is in Indonesia. And this is typically what I always share with some of my Taiwanese friends that are coming over here, and even Chinese friends, is that for Taiwanese companies wanting to come in here, one important thing is that you have to get a local, easy way of finding all these locals is to target a lot of these Indonesian students that are currently studying in Taiwanese universities. So I think in my previous company, I had a PhD that studied in Taiwan, Taita. And he was, and the reason why he has selected Taiwan as a place to do university is because actually in Indonesia, there is quite a sizable Chinese population, though it is still small if you compare it across the country. And language-wise, if you look at the island called Sumatra, in northern Sumatra, there's a city in Mandarin, it's called Mianlan. A lot of them, they speak Taiyu, or Minanyu, which is their base language. And the reason why this is the case is because if you look at a lot of the Huaqiao that is based in Southeast Asia, a lot of us actually come from the southern parts of China. So you talk about Fujian Shen, Guangdong Shen, Hainan Shen, Shantou. So there remains a sizable population in these parts of Indonesia that still speaks their dialect, which is Taiyu in northern Sumatra. If you go down to Kalimantan, there is a place called Kundian and Sangkoyang. So these people, the Chinese there typically speaks Kejiahua as a dialect. My suggestion for any Taiwanese company to come here is that if you want to come to Indonesia, recruit a local team. Best is if you can find some of these Indonesian students that are currently studying in Taiwan who understands Chinese culture very well, obviously can speak Indonesian, and for sure they can speak their dialect. That will give you a very shortcut way in terms of understanding the local grounds, the nuances, in terms of how to operate in Indonesia. So I think this is, one major advice that is extremely important. And also, if I can just advise, if I can just advertise about OVO, if any Taiwanese company wants to come to Indonesia, I think one of the most important things they need to tackle is how you get paid for your services. More than happy to have any connections. Please do reach out to OVO. We will be more than happy to see whether if we can you can integrate to us so that you can accept any consumers can accept can pay and use your consumer services using the OVO platform.
Okay, thank you, Wenyo. Andrew, what about your go-to-market strategy for suggestion for the Taiwanese audience?
Sure. So I think I'll tackle that question from two perspectives. One is from the perspective of a seller who wants to sell into Indonesia, And second is from the perspective of a company such as a tech company that wants to basically expand and grow and capture the Indonesian market. The first one, because I previously was in Taiwan trying to get merchants from Taiwan onto our platform. I have a few suggestions. Number one is the price of Taiwanese companies' product is way too high for most Indonesian buyers. And this is something that I've seen many times. So basically, Taiwanese companies sell towards Western markets or markets like Japan and Korea. By and large, these products will be too expensive and too fancy for the Indonesian market. So the first thing is probably...
how do they consider about the cost and the money they want?
To be very frank, Indonesia is a low price market. So if you don't have the cost structure to sell products, then basically you would be selling at a loss. I mean, that's the way it is. And that's why most of the products that are cross-border in Bukalapak, in Lazada or Shopee that come into Indonesia are from China, because they're essentially very, very cheap handsets and very, very cheap gadgets. So that's number one. I think price, and then I think culture and regulations, Wenyu has said a lot, so I won't go into that. The second is from a perspective of a company that actually wants to grow in Indonesia. I would say beyond finding the Chinese or Hokkien or Hakka speakers in Indonesia, my suggestion is to take a look at the Singaporean companies that are succeeding in Indonesia right now. And the two prime examples would be Grab, and which actually started in Malaysia, but Grab and Shopee. If you look at both, there are two characteristics that stand out. First of all is the top leadership spends a lot of time and energy in Indonesia, sometimes even living in Indonesia for various periods of time. The second is basically they also spend a large portion of their capital in Indonesia, which I think, to be very honest, most Taiwanese companies, especially startups, would have a very difficult time in matching. The third thing, of course, is people. And people, as you mentioned, you should find people who are mostly Indonesian. My own point of view is the Chinese Indonesian population might not be representative of all Indonesians. So a healthy mix between them and also the non-Chinese Indonesians, in my view, would be a bit more preferable.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Thank you both for today's interview, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.